chance to come to Thailand. I hope that isn't my music. Okay. Well, welcome, and I guess I'm very, very grateful for each of you for coming to take the time to invite me to my first visit to Thailand, and for the very gracious visit and tour that I had yesterday. It is really an honor for somebody to come from Canada to come to Thailand, especially in the winter. I'm going to talk, as my presentation talked about disruptive technologies, and it's really nice to be able to come to a conference like this. Usually I go to open universities like Sakta University and others around the world, and we just have our own little world. But now the open universities, they are giving way to interest in open educational resources from all kinds of universities and colleges and high schools. And it's really both an honor and a responsibility for me to be able to come and talk to people beyond just the open university world. So I have just a couple of slides to tell you a little bit about my own university. It's called Athabasca University, and it's located in the province of Alberta. And as you can see, it's quite far north in Canada. And we're 100% distance education, so we don't have campuses. We're all online students all across Canada. And to give you an idea of the size, that would be Thailand in the middle there. And you can see that Canada is quite a bit bigger. But as you see down in the bottom, if you can see it, we only have 35 million people in Canada, and you have 66 million people in Thailand. So we're a much smaller country in terms of population. And as you know, the capital, the human resources, are what is becoming more and more important. So I look forward to seeing how we can build collaboration between Canada, Thailand, and other Asian countries. This gives you a glimpse of Edmonton, the city that I live in. This is what it was like last week. It was 28 below Celsius. It was very cold, but it is nice in the summertime. This is our Heritage Days, when ethnic groups from around the world, including our Thai community, celebrate in the summertime. So Canada does have summer. And this is a quote from a Canadian, Yann Martel, who wrote that Canada is a great country. It's much too cold for common sense. It's inhabited by compassionate and intelligent people with bad haircuts. So I hope I'll live up to that. One of the things that I always start my talks with is reminding us of why we're in the business of education. And I think these three values try to sum that up. The first is that I think that we cannot think that the kind of education that we do today is as good as it can be. I think we must continuously improve the quality and the effectiveness and the appeal and the cost and the time. I think time we take for granted. We think that our students have all the time in the world, that they can learn at the speed that we want them to learn. But in fact, students are becoming to realize that time and being efficient and effective in learning is just as important as the quality of that learning. So I think that it challenges us all to make sure that we're giving the best to our students and making sure that they have opportunity to move as quickly as they can. The second value is that student control and freedom is integral to 21st century. I think too often we've thought of our students as just taking whatever it is we give them without giving them the freedom or the responsibility to chart their own learning. And you'll see in this talk today that there's more and more opportunities for students to learn outside of universities and outside of colleges and outside of formal education. And it's our challenge to add value to that opportunity and that freedom that students have. And the third is that I don't think that our current education models will ever scale to the lifelong learning need of all of the residents of our planet. Even in Canada, we have vast numbers of people who do not have opportunities to go to higher education because of cost, because of time, because of the location they live in. And I know that in Thailand and other countries in Asia, the situation is even worse. And so those three values have been kind of in my mind for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years that I've been giving talks. But now I'm starting to wonder about the last one. Do modern technologies allow us to scale? And I will be talking, and you will hear from most education technology people these days will be talking about MOOCs, about massive open online courses. And they have, there's records of 140, 150,000 people being in one course. So maybe, just maybe, we are making it scalable. But is it a quality education? And I think that's the question that we're struggling with now, and what it means when we add scalability to our current institutions. So I'm going to talk about 3 education technology disruptions that we're all experiencing right now. The first is the content crash, the vast reduction in the value of content. Second, I'm going to be talking about MOOCs, massive open online courses, and OERs. And finally, about new pedagogy, specifically about connectivist learning, networked effects, and participation and persistence. And all of these, I think, are very disruptive. They're different than the kind of world in which our educational institutions were formed and the kind of problems that they were meant to address. So how we deal with disruption, I'll talk about at the end of my talk. So the first is the content crash. And this is perhaps best illustrated by this graph by G.E. Ross. And this is the encyclopedia Encarta. I don't know if any of you even remember Encarta, but it was a project of Microsoft when Microsoft was the king of microcomputing. And they went around and they said we should not build an online, but we should build an electronic encyclopedia. And that was in the days when the Encyclopedia Britannica was selling for $2,000 or $3,000 for these hard-covered books that looked really nice. And when I was a young man or a young boy, there used to be people who would knock on our doors and try to sell us encyclopedias, and they would say, well, you know, your kid is going to be ignorant and fail in school unless you buy one of these encyclopedias. So there was, you know, at least 50 years of buying encyclopedias for their content that they had. And so when Microsoft started thinking about an electronic encyclopedia, they did a bunch of focus groups way back in 1985, and they said, well, how much would you pay for an encyclopedia that was just as good as the paper encyclopedias, but was on a disk, was accessible electronically? And their first focus groups, people said, well, we would probably pay $1,000 for an encyclopedia like that, because a paper con cost about $2,000 or $3,000, so $1,000, it's a good deal. So then they started the production of Encarta. And when it finally was first launched in 1993, they decided that nobody would no longer pay $1,000. They would only pay $400. So they sold a few copies of it at $400, but it didn't meet anywhere near their expectations. So then they lowered their price, and in 2009 they were giving it away, and finally they said, forget it. There is no market for this encyclopedia, even though it's the same content as what was sold for $3,000 in paper, and they thought it was going to be sold for $1,000 when they first started developing it. So you can see that the value of content has just continuously gone down in the last 20 years. And so if you're in an educational institution, and this especially hurts the open universities because we've prided ourselves on having these print packages or these content of television courses that are of very high quality, at least we thought so in our own minds, and they were very valuable, and that would define what education was all about. But as we've seen, these things, the value of these things has gone down, down, down. This is a magazine or an advertisement that comes to my house in the mail quite often, The Great Courses, And they're selling them at 80% off, or they're trying to sell them. I don't think anybody is buying them anymore. These are CDs and DVDs of people giving lectures. And the point is, why would you do that when you can go to YouTube, Khan Academy, Stanford U on iTunes, or any of the, there are like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of content that is for free, and we all like free. So what we have to do is get our heads around the fact that content is not what education is about. Content is just one of the things that make education happen, but it isn't something that we can define and we can make our institutions great at. And another problem with the content, or another solution, if you like, is just the cost of content. And if you were going to copy a book by hand, the way the monks did in the old days, writing them out, you can do that for a $250-page book. The cost is about $1,000. The cost to printing it, and this is when you can print it on demand, so you're not talking about huge print runs, is about $4.90. But the cost to copy it by computers is, about 8 thousandths of a penny. So the cost is almost free. So the cost to disseminate, to produce this information, or to get this information out has also gone down tremendously. Then there's the cost of distributing. In my university, we used to do a lot of correspondence where we would mail out these print packages. Costs us around $5.20 for that 250-page book. And if it's distributed on the internet, again, far less than a penny to distribute it. So you can see that the economics of education has changed quite dramatically, at least from the content side. And then the cost to produce content. When I was first introduced to education technology, we used to produce what we would call computer-assisted instruction, where tutorials and animated pieces of content. And roughly, we would say that it's somewhere around $1,000 to $3,000 a minute to produce what we called quality online learning. Now, 2012, it's approaching zero, because what's happening is that the users themselves are generating content. And so you get hundreds of thousands of hours of content. If you have a problem, you don't know how to fix your bicycle, you want to know how to go to the country next door or the store across the street, you look online, you get that content for free, and a lot of it has been put up there for free by other people. So the cost of generating, of distributing, and of printing content has gone down, down, down. But the problem is, we've got an education system that's built on there not being much content, or there not being much access to this content. And some of our institutions actually pride themselves on keeping people out and making elite institutions. And I think that that's been done a disservice to us as educators, and certainly to the people who pay for our economy. So when content is abundant and largely free, then I think we've come to a completely new world in which we develop our education institutions. And one of the hallmarks of that is systems like this. This is the LORE community, lore.com. And what they say is that anybody can be an instructor and anybody can be a learner. And they will give you an online learning management system that not like Moodle, which again is a free learning management system, but you have to host it. These guys will host it for you as well. They will help you to enroll students. They will actually give you a university campus, if you like, and anybody can do it. So we're seeing very disruptive when we talked about a scarcity world to moving to a world of abundance, like you can see from some of these applications. So the responses are open educational resources. And this is where us as educators are saying, well, we have to get in, we have to take advantage of these low costs of production and these low costs of distribution. And we're starting to create textbooks, learning objects, and open scholarships. And scholarship. And you can see, and you will hear from the Japan Open Courseware Consortium, as well as from Merlot and other people who will be talking to you, that we're now we're finally realizing that as educational institutions, we have a lot to gain by sharing our content and reusing the content from other people. And we're making that easier and more productive. This is one that I just heard about a few months ago at the Open Education Conference in Vancouver, the Silavula Open Textware Project from South Africa. And this Open Textware Project does not produce content online. They produce it in hard copy, in books. And they are producing millions of textbooks, and they're giving them away, and they're allowing students in South African schools who have never had a textbook of their own. If at best they've been able to share them, but through this project, they're developing them, and they're sharing them, and they're making textbooks have the value that they should have, which is approaching zero in hard costs. And the other interesting thing about the Silavula project is that it isn't done by people in North America or in Europe, but rather they got teachers from around South Africa who were recognized by their peers as being experts to create the content. And then they had their own internal quality control process, and they've been producing textbooks for the last 4 years, and they've got millions of them in distribution. And the other nice thing about it is we're starting to see some research that starts to say that, you know, if people start using open textbooks, they actually get higher marks, and their education and their learning improves. And you might ask, is that really true? Because the commercial educational publishers, the textbook publishers, have producing quality products for a long time. They're just too expensive. So how could open educational products result in improved learning? And the answer is that when you have open educational resources that are free, is that everyone gets one. Whereas if you have a commercial product, at least even in rich countries like the USA and Canada, a third of the students don't even buy the book because they can't afford it. And when you start giving everyone a book, their own book, a book that they can use and write in and annotate and take home, then all of a sudden the learning, the involvement, and they start becoming a real part of your educational institution. But one of the things that we've been finding is that just having educational resources, and Jerry's going to tell us about Merlot, and I remember when we first started working with Merlot, it was easy to get the content up there. Well, it had its challenges, but getting it adopted, getting people to contribute to it, getting people to evaluate it. It's more than just content. We have to have a culture, and a cultural change is much harder than a technological change. And I think that's what it's really important that you've taken the time to come here today, because I think you're a leader in your own institution, and it's up to us to try to develop a new culture that really embraces this and actually contributes, not just consuming and taking things, but actually producing things, I think is our real challenge. And these are two projects that are currently going right now. The Power Up is a European project, and what we've been doing, and Canada has been participating in it. And we've been developing and saying we don't need just examples of open educational repositories. We need examples of governments who have policies or school boards or education departments that support and encourage open educational resources. And sometimes ministers and civil servants, unless they see what kind of policies other governments have, it's hard for them to imagine how they could bring this into their own country. So both Power Up and the Creative Commons have got policy registries where we're doing country studies of people from countries all around the world, and we're trying to give examples that we can show to your Ministry of Education or your governor to try to say that, look, these are what other countries are doing. This is how we're making this cultural change from the top. And what we have to do, because most of us are not ministers of education, is to move from the bottom. But together with top down and bottom up, we can develop a new culture of sharing and openness in our institutions. And this is the very small contribution that Athabasca University has done. We've got an open access press. And so on the left you can see some of the titles. And every book that's produced by Athabasca University is available free for downloading. So you can see there's one on teaching science at a different distance. There's a one on instructional design. There's one on emerging technologies. There's about 10 of them in this series now, and there's more. There's one, a second volume on mobile learning is going to be out this year. There's another one being produced right now on open educational resources, and a third one on research in open and distance learning. So I would encourage you to go to that URL, aupress.ca, and download some of these books and share them and email them, and sort of be an agent for change within your own institution. And if you are an author and you're looking for a book, I can tell you from my own experience, I think I've authored or co-authored 9 different books, and the ones that are open are the ones that get me invited to keynotes like this. So I would encourage all of you to think about open access publishing, not to produce it so that it'll go to only a few libraries, but so that it'll be a contribution to the world. And the final thing I'd like to say about my own university and my own journal, this is the International Review of Research in Open and Distance Education, IRODL, and I think I'm accurate in saying that it is the most read and the most cited academic journal in open and distance learning. And the reason it's so widely read and so widely cited is not because the editor, myself, is so wonderful, I'll tell you that, but it is because it's free and it's open. And I would encourage everybody here to also punch that into Google or go to irodl.org and become a subscriber. If you subscribe to this journal, you will get an email about 4 or 5 times a year with the list of all the new journal articles. And you're welcome to download any of them or to contribute your own work. So the second disruption, besides talking about free content, what does that mean, and what's been happening in North America, especially, and especially in America, has been the emergence of massive open online courses. And this is just from a blog post, and it says, "The biggest course ever rocks higher education." And I will say that there's been nothing that has shaken up North American universities as much as the threat or the opportunity of MOOCs. It seems that every vice president or president of a university has become very worried that MOOCs are going to change or improve or destroy their educational institution. And I'm not sure if there's been much action recently, but here in Thailand, but certainly has been a lot of interest amongst the press in the last year. And over on the left here, you can see the graph, and it shows that the number of MOOCs went in 2010 from 8 or 9 up to about 116 last year, and probably will be over 400 or 500 this year. So there's just been an explosion in the number of offerings of these MOOCs. So what is a MOOC? It means the MOOC, massive. It means that they really scale. That a MOOC can have 100 students, it can have 500, it can have 5,000, it can have 50,000. Conceivably, it could have 500,000 students. The second is that they're open, and openness has many definitions in education, but in this sense, it almost always means it's free. It means that anybody can enroll, anybody can take this course. And it's online, of course. That's the way they get that economy, because the content can so quickly and so easily be distributed. And it's a course. It's not like the MIT offerings, the open courseware, or some of the learning objects. It's an actual course that has learning objectives and goes for a scheduled period of time. It's attracted an awful lot of money in the United States. Venture capitalists are thinking this is the future, and they're throwing money at it through Coursera, Udacity, and edX, and many others. Now, one of the major criticisms of MOOCs is the idea that they say, well, of course, 100,000 people enrolled in the course, but how many people actually finished the course, or how many completed the course? And this is some recent data from just this month that was released on a Coursera course, and they had 53,000 people enroll in the course, but only 4.8% of those who enrolled in it actually completed the course. So there's very high dropout rates in many of these MOOCs. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, partly because a lot of people are not serious about the course. They're just wanting to see what a MOOC is all about initially. But it's also they don't engage the students the way that a face-to-face university or an online course with a real tutor and in a sort of personal interaction tends to do. But they find that the more people put into the course, the higher the likelihood that they're going to get something out and they're going to complete it. And one of the things that's missing about MOOCs right now, and I think is a huge opportunity, is the fact that people take these courses, but they can't use them towards a degree or a certificate or some kind of accreditation. And I think that these large companies who are offering them are also very aware of that, and so they're starting to find ways that we can attest that knowledge, the way we can have testing centers so that we know that people actually have completed these courses and that they have actually learned something. And it's a huge challenge. It's easy to give these content out. It's hard to assess the learning and to credential that learning, and that's a frontier that we're all struggling with. But for open educators, this open access is nothing new. We've always tried to reduce the barriers. Now this has reduced the barrier of cost down to nothing. And so I think it is a good thing because it's opened up education. It's shown us what other people are doing. We can use pieces of it. We can use a MOOC much as we've used libraries or television shows or guest lectures or any other kind of an educational resource. So there is free access, but is it partial learning or is it real learning? I think that it's very easy for our professional educators to say, oh, this isn't the same as my university. It's not the same as coming to a university for 4 years. And I don't think anybody would argue that it is the same. But is it good enough and does it add value? And I think it's raised the bar because it's made things public and allowed us to both celebrate and criticize our own courses in relationship to these. So what kind of pedagogy is happening? Because educators, we generally don't like to think that we're technology-driven. We like to think that it's pedagogy, it's learning that's really what drives us and makes us interested in learning. And this is from an article that my friend John Drawn and I published a couple of years ago. And we talked about 3 generations of online pedagogy. And the first is the behaviorist cognitive learning, the second is constructivist, and the third is connectivist. And I'll make an argument that MOOCs are really in this first generation of pedagogy. And so there's a whole bunch of opportunity. MOOCs are not going to destroy or take over the kinds of learning, but they're going to be an important piece of a fully structured learning opportunity. So let's look at the XMOOCs, as they're called, the first generation. They have medium to high quality content. As I said, the content is low cost to produce and low cost to distribute. So we can see they have lots of screen captures, video lectures, lots of what they call page turners, where the content is there, the students are reading through. Because they have so many students, they can't do individual marking, so they do a lot of machine scoring of quizzes and assignment. And we're just starting to see optional testing for fees and emerging in accreditation. But what you do see is that they're scalable and they're flexible. And I think that's we've moved, as I said, we've raised the bar and we've improved that first generation quality. And that leaves challenges for our traditional schools. Are our courses really better than those from MIT or Harvard or Stanford? And it's a challenge for Stanford and MIT as well, because by putting their courses out online, they allow people to see whether they actually have a high quality or not. And one of the things that we say is, well, the difference between our university and a MOOC is that there's all this interaction with other students and interaction with professors. The question is, how much interaction is there on your university? You know, are your faculty members just lecturing to students? And if they are, could that lecture be replaced by a lecture from a provider of a MOOC? And then it raises the question, are we talking about giving people degrees and credentials because of how many courses they've taken, how long they've sat in your lesson, and how many labs they've done? Or are we talking about credentialing their learning, and how do we measure that learning? And then the other challenge is, well, if our courses cost this much and MIT's cost zero, who's going to take our course? And I think the business case is the biggest challenge for most of our institutions, is saying, how can we pay my faculty, how can we build buildings and make this thing work? And the venture capitalists are saying, well, we can make money by selling the attention, by selling advertisement, by selling auxiliary products to students. And I guess it's unclear whether there is really a business case, but they're certainly trying. And I would remind you of television, which doesn't charge people for the content, and they've been able to make a big industry. And so I think that's what's driving the venture capitalists. And then the other challenge to people in emerging countries or in Thailand and others is the education that's coming from the US or Canada or some other country, is that the same kind of learning that we need here in our country? So how can we customize that learning to make sense for us? So moving on to the second generation of pedagogy, we've called the constructivist line. And this is the kind of online learning that's mainstream in North America, at least today, and I imagine that it's similar here in Thailand. And you can see that the growth rate is quite strong. It's accounting for all of the growth in higher education in North America is the online learning. Students, more and more students, 32% of students now are taking at least one course completely online. That's not talking about just supplementing a face-to-face course with online resources. That's saying that 1/3 of the students are taking a full course online. And we're starting to see more and more students. The problem with the second generation, though, is that it's generally only in small groups, 30, 40 students. It doesn't scale up to the kind of numbers that we really need to have quality education that's open and accessible. But there are some good things about it. It is a long history of research and study. There's an established set of tools, learning management systems, some of them quite expensive, some of them quite cheap and free. We have all kinds of new tools that we can add to constructivist learning with synchronous meetings, video conferencing online, web conferencing. Of course, we have email. And what we're seeing is a lot of development of blended learning, where we're seeing students who go to classes sometime and they take constructivist kind of learning in small groups for the rest of their time. And we also have theoretical stuff. These are, you might have heard of the community of inquiry model that Randy Garrison and I developed 20 years ago with social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. So we know a lot about online learning in a constructivist era. But the problems with it are apparent too, in that it's not open. It means that you have to start together. You have to work in a group. That group is often controlled by the teacher, and sometimes students never get a chance to learn where they're having to be the drivers of learning. They're only doing what the teacher tells them to do. So is it really good training for lifelong learning? I think is a challenge that we have to face with constructivist models. It's often isolated from the world of practice. In other words, students come and they learn in a university, but they don't get an experience of learning out in the real world where they have to apply these skills. And I guess one of the big problems, this is Morten Paulson's work, where he talks about freedom of time, of pace, of space, of curriculum, and also freedom of relationships. Some people want to work in groups, they want to develop close relationships, but some people don't. They want to remain individual learners. So groups and constructivist learning has its challenges as well. And the third generation is connectivist learning. We're just emerging into that now. And connectivism is defined as a learning theory for a digital age by my colleague from Athabasca, George Siemens. And what connectivism says is what we should do for our students is help them to form networks and connections to content and connections to other people. And not just to people in the course, but we should help them to form connections to people in other countries, in other eras, in the workplace, younger students, try to connect the world in a massive kind of a way. So the three tenets are what we can get from network effects, persistence, and accessibility. I'll briefly go through those. The first is that when a connectivist learning, they don't like to have students be in a bubble, being apart from the real world. They try to make it so it's open, so that people can engage with learners who are not just in your course, maybe in your institution, but also in the real world outside, and try to build relationships and networks with other people. And they talk about persistence. And I know that after going to many Buddhist temples yesterday, that the idea of permanence in Buddha tradition is we're instructed to, realize the impermanence of life. But I think there's degrees. I don't like the impermanence of taking a course in Moodle, and at the end of the course, it's closed, it's gone. All the work that we've done is over. Whereas what I think we should be doing is working as we do in Wikipedia, where I build and I add some content today, and next year students make better that content, and then students after that continuously improve it. And so that we get persistence and we can allow things to last. And this is a famous example of the Rosetta Stone, where hieroglyphics were first translated from Greek, and because somebody wrote it down and somebody made it persist through another era. This is I said that connectivism builds networks. This is a quote from the American social capital theorist Richard Burt, and he says that people who live in the intersection of social worlds are at higher risk of having good ideas. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our students, is make them so they're exposed and they have a high risk of having a good idea. And I think if we do that, then we're allowing them to connect to those new ideas. This is Howard Rheingold, a real pioneer of internet culture and learning, and he's got a new site called Peeragogy, and he talks about what does a motivated group of self-learners need to know to agree on a subject, to find and qualify all of the learning that they find, and how can they use it to appropriate communication to learn. So I think what we're seeing is that with all of these resources on YouTube, on iTunes, on MOOCs, how do we allow students to take learning into their own hands, to connect with it, to form networks of other learners all around the world? And you can see all of these Web 2.0 examples of connectivist learning, of study space, which is a way for you to meet people who are all studying around the world. VoiceThreads is one of my favorite because it's asynchronous. It allows you to have a discussion or an argument or a debate and find various points of view. Learnist is a new one that really challenges us to find a particular thing that we like, whether it's bicycle racing or whether it's sports or whether it's algebra, and add resources to it, curate that site, build a little garden of knowledge that you own and that you are contributing to the rest of the world. And of course, Wikipedia down at the bottom for those who can see it. And I see there's a Thai Wikipedia. And I think that all of our students should not graduate from university without making a contribution to Wikipedia. I mean, it just seems like an essential thing that we should be contributing to knowledge and learning how to do it. And I've just got a few slides that I'm going to be ending with to talk about how we're doing this at Athabasca, how we're developing a connectivist learning environment. And what we're trying to do is to create a safe space for academics, but it has windows in it so that we can see out and other people can see in. And I think that's really important, that we not just build our closed university walls anymore, but rather that we make it so that people are confident and comfortable in contributing, but that they can share that with anybody in the world. So the system we've built, we call it Athabasca Landing, and it's built on diversity, control, and sharing. And it's a kind of an online world that's sort of like Facebook, and it allows everybody to have their own space, and everyone has the same rights, whether you're the president of the university or whether you're an undergraduate student. You all get to create content, form relationships, start groups, put photos up, do with this space as you want it to do, and it doesn't end at the end of the course. It continues and it persists. It's built on the ELG platform, which is a LAMP open source product, much like Moodle, and you can download it for free. There's 1,600 plugins that are available to customize it to make it the kind of environment you want. So it's a walled garden with windows, it's a private space, but it's also a public space. And it's a place that gives you blogging, photos, microcomputing, microblogging, polls, calendars. And it gives us a campus because we're an online and an open university. My goodness. I guess there was a screenshot of it that just didn't make it across. It's got three sort of organizational sets. Anybody can start a group. The group can be about a course like Chemistry 302 or something like that. It can be about all students who are interested in chemistry. It can be about sports. It can be about anything. People start their own groups and they curate their groups. It's about networks because you can follow people who you find of interest. You can you can form connections. You can make a network of just the people who are in your class or in your study group, and you can share with them. Or you can have a set of all the people who are interested in this topic or that topic. It's used by people to committees on our campus to start to have a place to record things, to do curriculum development. It's meant by our students' union as a place where they can use it. It allows people to make connections with people who have already been at the university but are now not there. And it basically gives students an empowering environment. The problem with Moodle and all of the learning management systems, it is very empowering for people who have control. For students, there's no empowering. All they can do is what the teacher tells them to do. So this idea of empowering people by giving them bottom-up control rather than top-down is not only prevalent in education, but we're starting to see this in government, where we're talking about ways to empower people to be, a part of the government of their country, sort of taking democracy to a higher level as well. And this is a political scientist from Sweden writing here, and he's talking about the bottom-up control has experimental technologies, things like this ELG environment that we're using. It has informal participation. It's not just participating in courses, it's participating when you want to, when the students want to, and non-institutional forums so that students can develop their own ways of making sense of the world. So, from these three, from content, from MOOCs, to connectivist pedagogy, I'm going to end by just talking about how do we make sure our institutions are able to monopolize and to use these opportunities. And, I'm running out of power. Well, let's hope that this will be a good incentive for me to end quickly. This is actually from a psychologist, and she talks about when a new element comes into the environment. And I would say that things like free content and the massive decrease in the cost of content and free enterprise companies like the venture capitalists getting into education, it's introducing a foreign element. And what we're at right now is right here with transforming ideas. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Some of them are working. We're in a very state of high change right now in online learning. But eventually we'll move beyond that chaos to a point of integration and into the new status quo. The problem is, how do we make sure that we're actually participating in these new ventures, even though some of them, maybe most of them, won't work? And if you go to talk to your university president and say, I have this wonderful new idea, it just might not work. What is he going to say? He's going to say, well, forget it. I want to only try the ones that are going to work. Unfortunately, there are no guarantees. So we have to, be flexible and be adaptable. And there's one of the theorists is an American from Harvard University named Clayton Christensen. And he's written about actually more now, about 5 different books on what he calls disruptive technologies. And there is the end of my presentation. Unless somebody has power, this isn't my machine. So do you guys have electricity for this? Oh, well, I should plug it in. Is a photo camera. And the real photographers, they said, oh, these are garbage. It's not high quality. It's not good enough. But it allowed a whole new generation of people to actually get into photography and start making them. And what happened, those cameras got better and better and better until now they're equal to traditional photography. And what happened to a company like Kodak, who owned that first company, the disruption was so great that that company has disappeared. So the impact of our disruptive technologies is that there's reductions in the costs and models. The teacher role is threatened because if people are going to take their courses from Stanford or MIT in a MOOC, what does that say about me? Does that mean that I don't have a role anymore? So it's very, it's scary. And what do we do about it? Well, I'm sure this is too complicated to see, but this is from Christian's 2003 book. And he says that sometimes it's better if you don't try to get your existing computer services department or your existing education faculty to develop these new technologies. Sometimes you have to protect them and take a disruptive technology and start a new, what he called a skunk works, which means just a small organization that can develop the new product, can meet the needs of new customers, and can develop that and incubate it till it becomes a sustainable technology in its own right. So what do we need? We need an enduring culture of innovation. We need to be able to take chances at our institution. We need to try these new techniques, this new content. We need to develop a sort of a culture of use and learning. We need to develop learning communities so that we support other people in acquiring the competence to use these new technologies. We need new partnerships, and I'm glad to see so many of you here today which are developing those partnerships around open educational resources. And we have to use these tools, cloud computing, and the real frontier is on testing, that the content is there. How do we test people? How do we look at the content, the items that they make? How do we test them? How do we credential, make sure that there is real learning happening? And we have to build new learning networks. And I think that we're getting off to a good start to doing that today. So my second last slide is I did look at a report 2011 on e-learning readiness of Thailand's university. It was a very interesting report, and it ended with a whole bunch of recommendations. And what concerned me about it, what I thought was the bad part about it, it was all the things that other people have to do, what government has to do, what the Ministry of Education has to do, what publishers have to do. But it didn't talk too much about what we have to do, what faculty members have to do, what students have to do to become e-learning ready. And it did say faculty support is essential in developing nurturing grassroots ideas from the faculty rather than imposing a top-down pedagogical approach. So I think that's a challenge to go back to your institutions and to say to your colleagues, it's not up to our university president to use open educational resources. It's up to me to use them. And it's not up to MIT to produce content. It's up to me and my students to create content, to put it in the Tide, Wikipedia, or other resources that are around, and to, sort of make things happen ourselves. So learning is a dance. It's a dance between the technology that sets the beat, but it's the pedagogy, how we use it, that makes a difference. And my final slide, to control your network density, you must be more flexible than your environment. And you might not be able to turn upside down like that, but that's the kind of flexibility that I think we all need to survive in this environment. So thank you very much. Those slides are available on SlideShare, and they're licensed with a Creative Commons license, so you can reuse these as you wish. And I'm looking forward to the next 2 days. I hope some of you will be brave and come up and talk to me, and I will try to do the same. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Anderson. From listening to your keynote speech this morning, I found out that open